Hey everyone, Jordan from LUTs Lounge here. In this video, I'm going to show 4 to 5 examples or settings that you can change in Final Cut to make your editing go by a little bit faster and just make everything run a little bit smoother, especially when it comes to hard drive space. That is a big one, and that's a lot of headache for some people in Final Cut, editors in general really, is running out of hard drive space. So these settings are going to help with that and just make everything go by a little bit smoother. So let's hop into Final Cut and I'll show you a few things that you can change. All right, so here we are. I'm going to go over here to my Final Cut menu here, and I'm going to click on Preferences. The first thing we're going to cover here in the Preferences menu is the Import section. Now, by default, Final Cut has a system in place, which is called a Final Cut library. When you create something, it creates a library of it, and you are able to put your files in that library. So this one says Copy to Library Storage Location. So Final Cut creates that library and it stores all of your media in that one big file, which is great. However, if you have a hard drive like I do, where I put every file from the whole year into this one hard drive, if I have a file labeled A, I'm going to have it on the hard drive, but Final Cut is going to also create another copy of that file A and put it in its library. So basically, over the year, as I'm putting files onto that hard drive or in Final Cut, it's duplicating that file over and over and over again, or all the files over and over again. So I definitely have a lot of space being taken up by the same file, just copied twice. If you're not really good at organization, that's probably the way you want to go. But if you have a really good organizational system, you really don't need that. So I would recommend changing it to Leave Files in Place. What this is going to do is have the file A, like we talked about, it's just going to keep it in the folder that you create. It's not going to copy it into a Final Cut library. So as long as the hard drive is plugged in, or you don't rename something or move something, the Final Cut will be able to read that file and nothing will happen. As soon as you unplug the hard drive or rename it or do something like that, Final Cut won't be able to see it anymore. So you will have to try to relocate it or something like that. But if you are working in definitely a really good organizational system, that's probably the way you want to go, is leave files in place. I found that it definitely helps save hard drive space, especially if you're working in 4K or 6K. My cameras shoot 6K sometimes. So if I'm working in that, I'm creating a lot of duplicate files basically, and I'm running out of hard drive space very, very quickly. So that is a really good setting to change. The next one we're going to talk about is under the playback here. The playback is, there's one setting in here that I really dislike, and that is the background render. So when you add files in Final Cut and you add some effects or something like that, as soon as you add those effects, after the start delay, Final Cut is going to start rendering that clip so you can play it smoothly whenever you want to just check out the settings. That's great if your machine is very beefed up and if you have a lot of hard drive space, because it creates temporary files when it does that. So if you have a lot of hard drive space and you have a maxed out machine or something like that, you probably are fine. But on my machine, I really want to have as much resources as possible while I'm editing. So I have that turned off. So when it's turned off, Final Cut's not going to render pretty much anything as you're editing. If you want to render something though, to check it out, what you would need to do is, we'll close out of here. You will like select this clip. Let's say I want to render this clip. I'll select it. I'll go to Modify and I'll click on Render Selection. That will render only what I've selected. And when it does that, you'll see this kind of dashed line up at the top here, really thin line. That means that is rendered and it's good to go. So speaking of render files, we just talked about rendering here. Speaking of render files, I mentioned that it creates duplicate or little mini temporary clips. Those, even though they're temporary clips and they don't really affect your project, they are still stored on your hard drive until you get rid of them. That is another thing that can take up a lot of hard drive space, especially if you do a lot of rendering larger projects. So to get rid of those, what you would need to do is, let's go to our library here. We're going to go to, we'll go to the LUTs Lounge library here that I have. I'm going to click on the library file, and I'm going to go up to File here, and I'm going to go to Delete Generated Library Files. When I do that, I'm going to get this little box right here, and it says you cannot undo this command. You're basically going to be able to delete all the temporary files in a way. from this location inside and outside of your library. So what this is going to do is take all these render files that you have, all these proxy files, optimized media files that you have, and delete them so you can save space. So if you were to click here, this is what I usually do. I do delete render files. I do all because I don't really need them once I export the file or the project. I don't really need them anymore. I can delete them. The only downside is if I need to change something, then it's going to have to re-render all that stuff. Usually it's not a big deal, but this is what I do here. And then I'll do delete optimized media and delete proxy media. Even though I don't work with proxies a whole lot, I'll just do that just in case. And then I'll click OK. Now, I have noticed that maybe on occasion, my hard drive would be, I would maybe have, I don't know, a gig, or not a gig, I guess 100 gigs left on my hard drive. When I do that after I've edited a lot of media, I'll get back, you know, 600-700 gigs back out of all that media that it deleted. So it's definitely worth it to cleanse your Final Cut library when you need to, and get rid of those media files, those render files, because you really don't need them. It's just taking up space. The next thing we're going to talk about is color correction. So over here in Final Cut, I'm going to go to Preferences here, and I'm going to go to General. Now, this is a very small setting, and it's probably not going to be used a lot. Some of you might not even change this, which is fine. But we have the color correction setting. It's set to color board right now. And the reason it's set to color board is because typically when I open my color correction, it's going to default to the color board setting. Now, if I want to use a different type of color correction, like color wheels, I really do like color wheels, I'll click on color wheels right here. So now when I go to this clip right here and I click on the color correction setting right here, it's going to default to the color wheels. So I like this one better. So this is not really a crazy, going to save you a lot of time. Over time it will probably, but if you're more into editing with the color wheels or any other color curves or anything like that, and you want to change that to be your default, that's the way to do it. And I found that it speeds up a little bit of time instead of having to change back and forth from the color wheels to color board or wherever. I found this to be a big one as well. So good setting to have, a quick one, and very easy to use. Now the last thing I'm going to talk about is actually hard drives. I use specific hard drives for my editing, and there's the SSD hard drives are a big one. If you want to see the hard drives that I use, I'm going to put a link down in the description to a blog post that I've written about this specific tip, the 5 ways to speed up your editing. I list the 2 hard drives that I use. I have a hard drive that's meant just for the desktop editing, and then I have a portable SSD hard drive that I use for on-the-go stuff for a MacBook that I have. So if you want to see what I recommend as far as hard drives go, head on over to the link down below on lutslounge.com. But I thank you guys for joining me in this video about a couple easy ways of speeding up your Final Cut library, and hope this helps with your editing, making it a little bit faster. So thank you guys for joining me in this video. Head on over to lutslounge.com. We got more stuff over there, Lightroom presets. We got LUTs files, we got blog posts, we got free resources, all kinds of fun stuff. And I'll see you guys in the next video.